Ever feel like you're running on fumes, but still trying to sprint through life? Well, you're not lazy. You're just depleted. Your brain, your body, your emotions, they all pull from the same battery and it's blinking red. So today we're breaking down how hustle culture is draining you dry. Here's the twist. There's one simple thing you can do to reboot your system, and it's not quitting your job, and no stimulants are required, so stick around. This might just be the reset you didn't know you were craving today on Off the Couch. And welcome to Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, because growth doesn't happen lying down. I'm Dr. Greg, Cason psychologist, here with producer Brian Gomez. Hi, Brian.
Hey, happy Monday, you guys.
And we have Tony Sweet on the board.
Well, hello, everybody.
Hey, Tony. You see, we're all in separate places right now because I had to travel. Brian is at my office. We're all figuring this whole thing out, especially as the studio is mixing up a little bit. So we're just trying to figure it all out. So let's try to talk about the thing right now. This, I first originally called this too busy to have a life because I realized this was a real problem for me, and I really tried to look into this, and I was surprised what I found. So this is actually something reflective of something called hustle culture, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. In hustle culture, we glorify the grind. We have early meetings, late nights, we do more, sleep less, all in the name of success. But what if the real cost isn't worth the badge of productivity? So, gentlemen, I have a quiz that will help see if we are victims of hustle culture. It is just 5 statements, and I want you to count on your fingers, just one hand. Just count there how many of these apply to you. So you've got none right now. So we're going to give yourself a finger for each one, and Tony, you'll tell us yours at the end.
Okie dokie.
Statement number 1. I feel guilty or anxious when I'm not being productive. Statement number 2. I regularly sacrifice sleep or meals to finish work.
Oh.
Statement number 3. I describe myself as busy more often than content. Statement number 4. Even when I stop, my mind races with things to do. And statement number 5, I believe rest must be earned through exhaustion.
That's probably you too.
I don't. Brian is referring because I'm actually holding up 4 fingers right now. Tony, how many do you have up?
Well, actually, I held up 4 also.
Yeah.
Except for I didn't do it for the last one, so.
Oh, we're you and I are the same.
We are.
Exactly the same. I actually do believe you can rest. But when I stop, I don't know that my mind races, but I'm always rehearsing like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that. And I have to do that. I got to write that down. Oh, I better remember that. When you're in the shower and they all come to you and you're like, oh, do you ever leave the shower, Tony, just to go write something down?
No, I probably should do that. But
I do.
I always say, oh, I'll remember it. And then most of the time I forget it. So.
Or when you're driving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the one that really struck me was number 3. I describe myself as busy more often than content. And I went, oh, shoot. I say every day I'm busy. I rarely say I'm content. I do feel that way often in my life, but I just don't call it out. But this was a big one for me.
For me, I feel like it was number 1 that if I'm not doing something productive, I feel like I'm failing.
And Brian, for the people that didn't see, how many fingers did you hold up? Because the people that
1.
Okay.
So let's talk about the scoring. Brian, 0 or 1. You're likely balanced. keep honoring your limits.
Brian I like to make sure I self-care and have a good time. And, you work hard, so might as well enjoy the little free time you do have.
Brian has more fun in his life, where for me, all throughout my life, it was just moments, like a Friday night late, and I'd still get up early and work on Saturday. It was like that, but it was moments as I went through it. And Brian, I have to say, you do very much respect your schedule. He goes to the gym. He says, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. He does all kinds of things to keep his life balanced. So absolutely, I believe that score. If you have 2 or 3, that is early burnout signs. It's time to slow down. And 4 or 5, that's you and I, Tony. Hustle overload. Prioritize deep rest. This is your signal. I don't know what deep rest means. I hope it doesn't mean, what they say. That there's a saying that the graveyard is filled with busy people. And so I hope it doesn't mean quite that. But I was a little taken back by this, and it really struck home. I thought this was kind of an interesting topic, and it came up to me because I went to a retirement party for a friend of mine. I couldn't believe that someone I knew as a freshman at UCLA was retiring. And I asked her, and there were lots of people there, people I'd known through the years, fellow UCLA students and other people. And I asked her, so what's next? You're retiring. Like, are you going to work part-time? Are you going to take this? Are you going to start a side project? And you know what she said to me? I'm not going to work. I'm just going to have some fun. I'm just going to do what I want. Right. Yes.
I couldn't even imagine.
It blew me out of the water. And I know probably some people are thinking, oh, you're a freak for thinking that way. But literally, that's how my mind works. I mean, it always has. Oh, yeah, I have a free moment. I have a free hour. I can do this. I can do that. And it really made me self-reflect. It really made me think, this is a problem in my life. Now, interestingly enough, Brian, who knows me well, has been saying this for a long time. Is this not true, Brian?
No, it's true. I even try to get you to get a cat just to kind of throw some little happiness into your life and a breather.
No, and we have a cat that visits our house. I think it uses our house as an Airbnb, and that cat always brings me happiness just having it around, So I absolutely agree, and I used to have a cat, and that was always a good thing. But that cat, my cat, spent the night. This cat just comes for the afternoon and then leaves. So, Tony, you and I suffer from hustle culture. By the way, this quiz is going to be in the notes. It's a little worksheet as well as some suggestions about what to do. But I want to talk about the problem. Then I want to talk about the rather unconventional solution to this. And this made me happy because the solution is something I can wrap my head around. It didn't ask me to do anything outrageous like quit my job. It didn't ask me to do anything outrageous like drink more caffeine or other stimulants. It just said something else. So let's go through the problem first. Let's talk about hustle culture. So what is hustle culture? I didn't even know this term existed. I mean, I had heard it, but I didn't really know this was a term that's actually used in the literature, and I found some academic studies around this. First of all, before I even go into it, what blew me away about the academic studies, they weren't American. There was one American study from BYU looking at high school students in America. But there were, Indonesia, China. I mean, we're talking all these different cultures around the world where hustle culture is becoming a severe problem. We already know about this from Japan. Japan's quite famous for this. So we're really seeing this kind of push that's happening not just here in the USA, but it's happening other places around the world. Hustle culture is the glorification of constant work, busyness, and productivity. It's often at the expense of rest, relationships, and mental health. And it's the belief that your worth is measured by how much you grind. What's your reaction, Brian? Do you feel that in your generation? Because it was a big part of mine.
I feel it, and especially you see it a lot on social media too. A lot of people, I feel like, take pride in like being so busy and like never stopping, and it's almost like this boss attitude that you're always having to like be on your businesses and stuff. But I mean, I think it's cool. I admire it if that's you and everything, and like you're super focused and motivated to like reach a goal financially or get a house or something. But I mean, I've been more of like, I'm just going to enjoy my life with it, you know? So I mean, I definitely see it. And like I said, people love to show off like their hard work and no sleep or anything. But I'm like, I love my sleep. I need a solid night of sleep.
Yeah, you know, I hope I don't love to show it off. I find that tacky. You're supposed to work hard. To me, you're supposed to work hard and not make a big show of it. But I do see myself as one of those. But I wouldn't post about how busy I was. That I wouldn't do. I wouldn't show it. But we're going to talk about it because social media actually is a problem place, I found. But it also said that, you know, it looked at generations and it said Gen Z and millennials are really suffering from this. And I was kind of surprised because I know Gen X, which Tony, I know you're very much a part of, and I came up, that Gen X was really pushed in that direction. Especially remember Gordon Gekko, Greed is Good.
Oh, yeah.
And it was
the 80s.
Yeah, it was all, sorry?
No, I said the 80s, that was all about greed, pretty much greed, decade.
It was a greed decade, and that was the church of greed. I mean, you had to accumulate, you had to achieve, you had to do whatever you could to climb that mountain, and that was pervasive everywhere I went. And plus, people now are questioning going to college. No one questioned. Not everyone went, only, you know, a small percentage went, but everyone saw the value, and people worked hard and tried to get there and tried to get as far as they could. So we saw a lot of that. That was just normal in society. Absolutely normal. And when I was a kid, like even I started working when I got my first job at 14, but I got a real job at 15, lied about my age, and was going to school and was involved in activities, student council. I was yearbook editor in my last year, my senior year. I did band, I did drama, I did all kinds of activities. I was constantly involved, and that was just part of life in addition to academics.
No, that's interesting because, I mean, I was never one of those kids that like stressed out about doing all these extra things in high school or anything. I was just there to have a good time and show up to class kind of, you know, but I do, again, I'm like a little jealous of those kids that did put in that effort to do all that. Cause I'm sure it pays off, you know, when you're trying to go to a specific college or anything like that. But I just couldn't do it. I was just trying to have fun.
I think it pays off to a point. And I think there is a mental health impact. And I remember first seeing this. You'd think I would have learned my lesson. But I remember first seeing this when I was in high school. And there was a guy, and I may have spoken about him before because it made quite an impression. There was a guy who was brilliant. He was, I think, 2 years ahead of me. Brilliant guy. And in the advanced track that I was part of, but 2 years back. And he committed suicide. And I had already admired him well before that because I saw him do his speech for Speech and Debate Club, and I knew about some of his work. So this is somebody who was on the school radar, someone who was very impressive by almost every measure. And when he committed suicide, everyone pretty much talked about perfectionism. And then fast forward that when I was at UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin, and I was working in the student counseling center. I was there in school, but I was working in the student mental health center, and we did an intervention because there had been a suicide in the honors dorm there, and it was the same issue yet again. Like that the person had an absolute measure of perfectionism, somehow had fallen down on that and took their own life. So we can see it go to some pretty severe extremes. That's the thing.
And then do you think that's from like the pressure of like their parents?
Hey, that is a good question. How interesting, Brian. So I'm listening to Kara Swisher's book, and you guys probably have no idea who she is. She writes about the tech industry. I just really enjoy her. And she was writing about Sergey Brin, who's one of the founders of Google. And she said, she went to his party. She was invited to his birthday party. She went. And this is a guy who at this point I think he was either a billionaire or very, very close. Like at this point, he was extremely successful by any measure. And she went to his birthday party, and she said, you got there, and there was nothing but a Safeway birthday cake. And Safeway is a grocery store out here. And it was a sheet cake inside the plastic container. And she said it never came out of the plastic container. Like people just scooped the cake from inside the plastic container. They didn't even transition it to a plate. So, and then she was talking to his parents. And she was talking, she said like, oh, you must be very proud of his success. And they said, well, he's actually quite a disappointment because they immigrated from Russia. And so they had an idea of what success may be. And she said, the mother said, we really wanted him to get his PhD. And he didn't get his PhD. So, And so does it come from the parents? Well, at least in that case, you can see some evidence.
And were they white? Do you know?
Russian, yeah. Probably.
Oh, Russian. You said okay. All right.
Although there are some non-white Russian people. I mean, it's so I'm sorry to be so glib, but yeah, I've never really thought about his ethnicity, but so. I mean, or his racial background. But anyway, that was just really fascinating to me. So, hustle culture's societal pressure to always be working, achieving, and striving, where rest is seen as weakness and self-worth is tied to output. We talked about the mental health impact in the extreme, but there are mental health impacts that are pretty kind of in the normal range. One is depression. When you feel like you can't achieve enough or you feel like you're depleted, you can feel depressed. Another, probably the most common one, is anxiety. When you feel like there's something around the corner you've got to achieve, you're trying to juggle all these balls, you can't get everything done. But there's probably one that is not talked about quite as much, and that's chronic burnout. And that reinforces the idea that chronic burnout, and we're going to talk about that later, but it reinforces the idea that productivity equals value. And if you don't have value, that you're hitting the skids. Like if you aren't constantly productive, you hit the skids. And then you can fall down on your own measures, your own beliefs about yourself. You can feel guilt when resting, all kinds of things. So let's talk about it in the workplace. The workplace is where everyone thinks about it. When I think about this, we think about it in the workplace. It celebrates the long hours, the rise and grind mentality, and skipping breaks. It rewards being constantly available over the weekend and overextended. It discourages boundaries and self-care. And yet that always being on. And it's interesting because I mean, I have to admit, I give Brian grief sometimes because when we're working together, it's true, I'll admit it, that when we're working together and he's texting his friends, and I'm like, hey, what about me? Like, what's going on here? Because like in my world, you couldn't make a personal phone call during work hours. Like that was forbidden.
Yes.
So to have
I get it, but I also am like, my work is a little bit different too, that I'm always on and have to be available for like anyone I work with. And you know that because I have to be on whenever you need stuff too. So it's like whenever I do have those little moments of like, I can throw in a personal text, or like even this weekend, my boyfriend had to tell me to put my phone down and put it away because we were eating and I was still texting back like another person I work with, like nonstop about these things that we were, just discussing, but it could have waited. But it was that thing that it's like, oh, I feel like I have to be on and respond to every text message. And, I was literally in the middle of eating and I could have waited like 30 minutes to respond to everything.
Yeah. No. And, it's interesting because one thing that's helped me, Brian, and, is that when I see clients, I cannot respond. And sometimes when I'm doing a video session, I'll see a flash of a text that is like, and I'm tempted to read it, but I won't. And I'll have to stay focused on the client in front of me. When they're in person, they're much easier because I can just stay focused on them, have my phone. I usually put it face down so I don't even see it flash. So it's always tough. And Tony, are you doing text as we're talking here?
Hold on. Let me finish this text real quick. Now I'm back. Okay. Yes. No, I don't do that.
Okay. Good for you.
I only do if it's a work thing. Normally, personal stuff. No. But my husband, yes, constantly is texting. Even at work sometimes, but yeah.
You think it's like a younger generation thing that we're just so addicted to being glued to the phone?
For sure. I think for me personally, just for what I see, interns, when I've had interns 5 years ago, not so much I had to like correct that behavior, but the last 2 or 3 years have been extremely like, put your phone down. Put your phone down. I even had to put it up in my office to say no phones in the studio.
No, good for you. I think you have to do that because what happens is people have trained themselves that any downtime they cannot stand, and that is called frustration intolerance or distress intolerance, that any moment of boredom or disengagement they have to then fill. To help with this particular thing, I tell people that when you go to a restaurant, when your partner gets up to go to use the restroom, do not look at the phone. Sit there quietly and just let it be. Also, I'm a big believer of leaving your phone in the car, which I can no longer do because my phone is my key. So that would just, that's a problem. So I stopped doing that, but I used to do that just to kind of test myself. Like I'm going to go into the grocery store and I won't have my phone, just to give me periods without it.
But it's like, what if you're using your phone to pay?
Well, usually I would have brought a wallet if I was going to do that. If I didn't have my wallet, I suppose I would need my phone to pay. I usually like to have options. So, this was interesting to me because I looked into that, and there's a movement in China called the 996 movement. Now, when I first saw this, I'm like, 996. Okay, is that like 9 hours work, 9 hours personal time, and 6 hours sleep, which is not enough, but, that's okay. And I thought, okay, that is not super unreasonable. Boy, was I wrong. Do you know what the 996 movement is?
I'm afraid to ask.
So this is where employees are expected to work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That is 72-hour work weeks with little rest. And it was popularized in China's tech industry, but it is spreading to other industries in China.
As Whitney Houston would say, hell to the no.
To the no. And that, this also, this caused some real big problems, of course, as you can imagine: sleep deprivation, burnout, depression, and anxiety. And there were even a few documented deaths from overwork, which is also called karoshi in Japan, death from overwork. And as we know, Japan culture, this has long been a problem of working insane hours. And if you look into Japanese culture, it's a fascinating culture. But one thing that is so interesting is they have these work hotels that you go and they basically are just cubes, like berths that you just slide into, almost coffin-like structure that you go into and you sleep, then you come out and you shower, and that's all you do. You're not there to spend any other time except sleep, shower, leave, go to work, and then you go back in. And so they're very inexpensive, and people use them when they're just working like 5 days a week, or here, I guess 6. And that can really lead to a big backlash. In China, the developers in China in 2019 started a movement called Work 996, End Up in This ICU. So they really looked at, that this was causing very severe medical issues. And by the way, to talk about myself just a little bit more, when I was in school, I had a really severe issue because I was working. I started my PhD program, and I had, what these call grad assistantship, grad teaching assistantship. So it was to help pay for your graduate student education. And that was one reason I chose the university I did, because I could work at school, get my tuition, books, all that paid, have enough to live on, and go to school. Well, I was there maybe a month, and the governor of Texas, who at that time was George Bush, decided they were going to take away all the grad student assistantships and other types of aid to grad students in the state of Texas. Well, they didn't give a warning. They just did it. And then they sat me down, I think the next day, and said, well, we have no more funding for you. So I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go from this. And that caused me to have to scramble for a lot of things. Either I had to go to a different school, which I would have to wait a year to do, or I could continue at University of Houston and have to endure a different way. So what I did do is I took a job at a community counseling center, and it was a 40-hour-a-week job, which they allowed me to reduce to 32 hours a week sometimes while I was in classes, and then when I was not in classes, it went up to 40. So you can imagine what that was like going through school. It ended up being a good thing because I did my research through the community counseling center because it was a ready set database. I could give surveys, I could give all these different things. So I looked at it as a positive thing in the end, and it gave me a lot of really good, solid experience, but it was scary, and it really tested my resolve at the time, getting through it. And this is not unusual. In education, as we were talking about, students feel pressure, even in high school, to join every club, ace every test, and to build a resume by age 16. And shoot, if that wasn't me, because I wanted to build my resume so I could get into college. That's all. That was the whole thing, wasn't it? I also wanted to have fun in school. I was also very extroverted, and I really wanted to do these things. So it wasn't like I was forcing myself. I wanted everything. If there was a pie, I wanted to eat the whole thing. That was basically me. But I really did want to have a good resume. And when I went to college, I had a very high GPA. I think my GPA, we could only top out at 4.0. We didn't have those extra Like, I don't know how they do it now. Now people are like, I have a 4.8, whatever that means, because we didn't have anything like that. But everything counted the same, even the advanced classes or the advanced placement classes, all counted the same. But I had a 3.93, I think, in high school, which was good. I graduated number 8 in the class.
Wow. How many people?
Out of 1,000.
Oh, wow.
Why? Because I just really, I studied. But I also, as we talked about, I also didn't take the most advanced math class because I didn't want it to screw up my GPA. And I always look back on certain things and I think, oh, that was a mistake. I really wish I had more, I took more risks and just was okay. And we'll talk about that toward the end. Hustling in high school is confused with ambition and leading to academic anxiety and burnout before adulthood. And actually, the BYU study, I talked about that. High school students, they found, show early signs of hustle mentality, that there's high engagement, but potential for long-time risk. And it's really too early for them to feel the effects. Because when you're young and when you're starting out, number one, you're hungry, but number two, you have a lot more physical stamina to be able to handle things. Like I was always working in high school. I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue. I worked at Disneyland. I worked at wherever else I worked. I worked at taking tickets at United Artists Cinema. Not taking tickets, selling them. I was a cashier. But that kind of stuff. So I did all kinds of jobs.
And do you think it's better to be that way, or is it more of like a balance kind of situation?
Brian, I have to fight myself to say it's not good, because in my soul, I always believed that my hard work helped me. But I can also tell you it cost me a lot. So, I think I could have done it a little more intelligently, perhaps.
Or more freely, do you think?
Freely? What do you mean?
Like more without calculating or working so hard.
If I had not worked as hard, I don't know that I could have survived. That was the other thing. I mean, I did get student aid. In fact, I got a scholarship at UCLA, but it still wasn't enough to pay for everything. But then you're paying for work, because I had to pay for the gas to drive to work. I had to pay for clothes that I had to wear at work. I mean, how do you measure everything? So it's tough. There is potential long-term risk, and there becomes a normalization of burnout before adulthood. And I've hit that skid many a time. But I was talking about in my doctoral program, I was very, very stressed. It was very hard. I told you that whole story about how I got there. And then what happened in my second year of school, I got hepatitis A.
Oh, wow.
And I had a placement at the VA hospital, and unfortunately there was an outbreak of hepatitis at the hospital, and patient 0 was the guy who worked at the pizza place. And I used to eat at that pizza place every single day. It was the cheapest thing you could get, and I thought really the most delicious. So I ate there every single day. Sometimes that was my only meal. And it was like, that was incredible because I loved pizza. So to me, it wasn't a sacrifice. But I did get hepatitis, and that turned my world upside down. But I was under so much stress, I couldn't fight it off. And I got a very, very severe case. And I ended up being sick for a year.
Wow.
So that was not a pretty scene. That was it was incredibly scary, too. There were times that were very touch and go. But I pulled through, but it was a very scary time. So, and I couldn't earn money. I couldn't pay my rent during that time. And you know what happened at my work? This was incredible. A lot of people gave their vacation time to me to help pay for me.
Oh, that's
very
nice.
No, incredible. People can be incredible when you really need them. So that was an incredible time. But that really should have also been a wake-up call to me, because I truly believe in my heart of hearts that had I not been so stressed and so overworked, that I would not have, I probably still would have caught the infection, but I bet I would have had a little more to fight it off, because I was burning the candle at not both ends, but also trying to burn it from the middle too. So I was burning everywhere. Let's talk about where you usually think about it, is hustle culture at work, at long hour. We already did that, didn't we? And then let's talk about social media. On social media, Brian, you mentioned this. There's like the hashtag girl boss, the hashtag no days off, and the grind set posts like, wow, we're going to do it. This is how you do it. And then people do those little compilation videos where they show no breaks whatsoever. Like, I'm going to do my workout routine, and you see me rip open a protein bar. The next thing, I'm pushing a weight, and then I'm jogging and, busting through some mile marker and da-da-da. It looks like they did everything in 1 minute time.
And then it makes you feel like if you aren't doing that exact same thing or to that amount, that you're failing.
Right. Exactly. And that creates toxic comparison loops. And that the problem with me with social media is that curated success, that people are pushing a picture that is probably not true, but that's how they want to represent themselves, and other people are thinking that's real. I'll always tell the story about that there was a guy who I knew was homeless, was sleeping on the couch of a friend of mine, and I went in to have my hair cut. And the guy who's getting my haircut, the guy was there beforehand. And he said, "Oh, you know so-and-so? Oh, he's so rich and so successful." And I go, "No, what are you talking about?" Like, I was completely caught off guard. And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I know he's sleeping on a couch of a friend of mine. He can't afford rent right now." And he said, "Oh, well, his Instagram has him on like helicopters and has him on, all these like Ferraris and all this stuff." And I said, I didn't have his Instagram account, but I did know that those were not accurate. So
I think that's a lot of like people on Instagram. Nobody wants to post the raw or like, what life is actually looking like without those like 30 seconds that they've compiled.
it's amazing. It also happens at home and in relationships. And downtime, like the whole thing about side hustles, I hate the concept of side hustles. I think they're an unfortunate fact of reality that jobs are not paying what they should, and people have to get extra money somewhere. So that I'm sympathetic to, but you're not bad for not having a side hustle. When my parents, my dad specifically, when I was young, anytime I would say, like, and I was a kid, I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. I would, like we'd be hungry. Well, can I have a sandwich? And he'd sing, "Get a job, da 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 da. When you get a job, then you can pay for your own." And then, you could see where I got some of my neurosis, but, and then I couldn't eat, but but I think that's partly what ingrained me. Oh, I have to be working all of the time. Also, people do this in kind of a twisted way with relationships. I call this relationship maxing. They have these high impression dates. They feel like they have to wow people. They have to do things. Or it's in the tile I put up about relationships, that people in their relationships will stay so disengaged from the relationship that it will cause heartache or heartbreak, like with you, Brian, when you were at dinner. And rest only feels earned after exhaustion, and this is especially a problem. But I also want to touch on really quickly, hustle culture doesn't just apply to people at work. It can be stay-at-home moms too. I see moms getting this pressure all the time. Parenting, they have to do it all: cooking, cleaning, educating, organizing, documenting it on Instagram to show how great they are. I mean, oh my God. And that is just puts them in this compare and despair mode. They feel guilt for resting. they feel, and their labor is invisible, so they have to actually show that it's valuable for other people who may come over and see what a clean house they have, or what a wonderful meal, or they always look put together. And this is just an undue amount of pressure, I think, for people. I've got to go pick up my kids. Did your parents pick you up at school, Brian?
No, my parents always had to work, so I would either have an after-school program, or I would just walk home from school, or the after-school program.
And did yours, Tony?
Oh God, no. but I only lived. It was a town of 200 people, so I walked a block home.
Oh,
so.
okay, never. But I took, like in elementary school, I had to walk to an elementary school and then take a bus 45 minutes to another elementary school. And to come home, it was the same thing. And my parents were working like yours, Brian. It was just, there was no option. There was just no option. And that was completely normal back then. The whole pick up kids thing is completely like wild to me because I don't remember that. Maybe there were a couple of parents who did that, but that was very unusual. So, yeah. And the moms also feel like they're just a mom and they don't have an identity of their own. And it's this constant perfectionism that is pushes them, that they have to be perfect, and other people are telling them that all the time. So it's really problematic. There is a correlation between long hours and mental health symptoms, and what we see, like we talked about before, anxiety, sleep disturbance, and chronic fatigue. But the big one I want to talk about really quickly is burnout. It's a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged and excessive stress. So when you're in a work or caregiving mode and you're giving too much, you can eventually come to an end point. It's more than just being tired. It feels empty, drained, unable to meet the constant demands placed on you. I often tell people that burnout is work depression, to try to conceptualize it a little bit more, because it's not technically a depression, but it overtakes you the way depression does. You feel emotional exhaustion, overwhelmed, drained, unable to cope. You feel something called depersonalization. That's where you feel like you're not even in your own body. It's an anxiety symptom, believe it or not, developing, this kind of detached attitude toward work or people or whatever, responsibilities. And there's a reduced sense of accomplishment. You constantly feel unproductive because you can't operate at the same level you used to operate. So you feel like your efforts aren't even mattering. So it starts to really snowball. It's really a bad thing. And it's actually not a mental health condition or a mental illness, but it is recognized by the World Health Organization. It's an occupational phenomenon. So not a diagnosis, but it is very serious. So let's talk about the broader impacts too, that social isolation, people working at home all the time, there's decline in sleep quality, which could cause safety accidents out on the roads, and blurred lines between self-worth and achievement. And so people become disconnected from themselves, and it can really be a problem. I wanted to talk quickly about the diathesis stress model. This is a technical term, but the bottom line, and I'll go over this, is to say your vulnerability or you have a predisposition to something. It could be genetics, it could be personality. It could be just all the crap that's going on, like you took a job that's very high push. And then stress is life events from environmental pressures like trauma, job loss, etc., but it could be just all the stress at work. You put those two things together, like you have vulnerability plus some kind of external pressure, and that makes things much worse. Now, some people can handle more than others. That's why some people don't react to the same amount of stress, and some people can have very low capabilities to handle stress, but they have very low stress, so they're kind of in a good place. So it's not either one alone. You're actually looking at both. And we look at that a lot in the mental health world. We kind of look at that duality. What is the predisposition plus the actual stress? But I also talk about the human battery model. I think that's a little easier to understand. On one side, you have what you're being asked to do, work emails, mind, physical stamina, emotional capacity. And on the other side of the battery is what recharges the battery, being in nature, going to therapy, working out. And you have to constantly think about how to recharge your battery so that you can use it for things that you want to use. My favorite cartoon of all is an old cartoon from the Far Side, where there's a kid. He's sitting in a classroom and he's raising his hand and he's talking to the professor and he says, "Mr. Osborne, can I be excused? My brain is full." And
Been there.
I know that feeling.
Been there.
Happens all the time. So what do we do about this? There actually is one thing. And if I'm going to say that there's one thing that you can do, it actually has been shown in the research in multiple studies to work. It doesn't fix it, but it does work. To fix it, we're going to have to take away your stress. But if you're like me, you're not going to just quit. You're not going to just give up. You're not going to stop caring for your kids. You're not going to stop doing different things. You're actually going to want to keep those because those reflect values in your life. Rather, there is something that you can do, and that's something called self-compassion. Now, hear me out, because I think when people hear that, they think, oh, this is some kind of weird, mealy-mouthed solution, but it actually does make a great deal of sense. What would you add a reaction, Brian?
Or no?
Okay. Self-compassion mitigates stress and emotional exhaustion and encourages mindful breaks, realistic self-talk, and emotional boundaries. So let's talk about what self-compassion is. Self-compassion is really when you give yourself a break. And for me, you know how I have to do it? I can't say, oh, be compassionate to yourself. I can't. That doesn't work with me. You know what I have to say to myself? It's okay. It's okay if I don't do 100% here. It's okay if I screw up. It's okay. Like, I think about the longer range consequences and I think I'll be okay, even so. I send an email at 11:30 at night and I misspelled something or say the wrong name of the person. I mean, literally, I should never send emails late at night, and I keep falling into that trap. It's such a dumb thing to do. But I will do something like that, and then I have to forgive myself, because then I just have to let it go, that I made the mistake. And if they don't want to continue seeing me because I said something wrong, then so be it. I have to let that be. But that's the only thing I can do in that moment. Otherwise, I just beat myself up, and how helpful is that? Other things you can do is to practice mindfulness, show kindness to yourself, use supportive touch. That's like a massage, but just having someone touch you, touch your back, or hold your hand, those kinds of things, cuddling at night, those all can be really incredible ways to help feel better. Or it can also be like my brother's in the hospital right now, and this also brought this issue really close to home. I've been visiting him bedside, and just to me standing there, and he's not responsive right now. But I just stood there and I just rubbed his hand and rubbed his arm, and even talking to him helped me feel better, and just touching him and knowing he's there. Also challenging your self-talk, and that's a good old cognitive psychology thing, is to start to relate to our thoughts differently, so we don't take them as somehow directives from up on high, but they're just things that are happening in our brain, and that we can react to them differently. Brian, you had some questions.
Yes, we have some listener
questions.
Okay, for the first one, I feel guilty when I'm not being productive. How do I know if that's hustle culture or is just ambition?
Ambition is, I don't know, it's really tough to pull them apart, because I would not say guilt is ever a part of ambition. So when you feel guilty, you're literally feeling like you've done something wrong and you're a bad person for having done it. So like I said, with the self-compassion, this may be a perfect question to talk about, to go back to self-compassion, that you can look and say, okay, if I'm not doing something, it's going against my value of wanting to be ambitious right now. but it doesn't make me a bad person. This is just what I need to do right now, or I want to spend time with this person, or I want to just watch a movie. And that's part of me recharging my battery. So you don't criticize yourself for the action. You can look at the action, question the action that you're taking time off. But if you feel guilt, you probably are falling into hustle culture over ambition.
Okay. Another one is it possible to be successful without buying into the hustle culture? Like, can you still make it if you take breaks?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if we really look at it, there are cultures that really build these things in. That if we look at the happiest countries, which are the Scandinavian countries, they work very, very hard, but they also have a lot of breaks and community time and relative time, being with relatives and doing things in the public square, etc. It's all built into the culture. So although they still work very hard, they tend to be much happier or more content overall than we are. And they have a lot of community support, which like in American culture, Chinese culture, maybe Japanese culture. I mean, I have to look more into that, but we don't have that here in American culture. It's really pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have to achieve. The only way to get out is to pull yourself up, and that's how you make things happen. Again, going back to the original, that Gordon Gekko, greed is good. So that is a problem when we start to mix those things up.
Okay, another one. How do I talk to my boss about needing boundaries without sounding lazy or unmotivated? And I think this is a big one because with one person I work with, sometimes I get text messages at 7 a.m. about work already, that it's like, I'm just getting out of bed,
Are you talking about me? Because
No. I feel like, yeah. No.
I try to be mindful of that.
No, you do. And if anything, you text me when like you're at the gym or working out or like anything like that. And at that point, I'm in the same boat. But there's another person I work with that sometimes, it's like, or it's late at night or like, I try to be mindful that if I'm going to send out an email or if it's any work related thing, it's like, I try to use like office hours if I'm going to communicate with somebody.
Much smarter. Yeah. No, you can schedule things too sometimes, but I found that really difficult to do. Like sometimes I've had to write the email and just let it sit there and feel anxious about it till the next morning that I could send it. If you can schedule it, probably it would take away some of that anxiety. But how to handle it? I think that, is to talk to the boss Talk to the boss about sharing the same goal first. Like, hey, I really value this. I really want this to work. And this is what would help me to operate better. And what would help me to operate better would be you could even say, you can send this thing at 7 a.m., but please know that I may not be able to respond until 8 or 9, so that you don't feel instant need to respond. Because I tell clients they can text me any time of night because I have my phone off, like it is off. So I'll get it when I get it. But they can't send me, anything emergency wise. But what you can do with somebody else is to start to establish nice boundaries, but do it in a nice way. To say, hey, this is what would help me. Would you be on board for this? If it's an emergency, you could reach out. But I just wanted you to know that this will help me feel like more productive and more focused. It's going to hurt them no matter what, because bosses in general do work 24 hours. That's just how they roll. That's the typical thing. And in fact, I think a lot of times when someone's hired, especially as a personal assistant, and I think a lot of personal assistants, we live in a town with a lot of celebrities and wealthy people who have personal assistants. I think their jobs are often expected to be 24 hours a day, and I think that's very, very rough on them. Unless that kind of chaos is something that you thrive on, I would say steer clear from those kinds of jobs. But for the moment, I would just be saying, make it about you. Like, hey, this would help me. I really, and just really call out the shared values. Don't say anything about their behavior. Don't say that they did anything wrong.
Okay. Okay. Do we have time for one more?
We do.
No. Okay, give us one more.
Okay. Okay. What if my entire friend group is deep in hustle culture and it's hard to step away without losing connection? And that I think we can relate to because we live in LA and like most of our peers and friends here do some sort of cool work in one way or another. And I feel like we're constantly kind of comparing ourselves to whenever, our friends are like, oh, I'm doing this and doing this. And if you don't seem like you're doing just the same amount of things, I feel like you're kind of like, you feel like you're falling back.
No, I totally get that. And I think there's a compare and despair. I hate to use that term, but I think that is a totally normal thing. And I do it all the time. And I have friends who are wildly successful, so it's really easy to despair if I really get down to it. But rather is to look at your own value. I will have to go back to the question because I'm just kind of riffing off that thought. Because really to look at your own value about what you do, to really think about what you do, and is this the type of life that I want? Is this the type of work that I want? Is this the type of person I want to be? And if this is the type of person you want to be, if this is the type of life you want, then you're going to feel much better about yourself because you're making choices that are consonant or consistent with you as a person. If you're trying to be them, you're always going to fail because they can do them much better than you can do them every day of the week.
Great advice.
So, yeah, let's talk about combating hustle culture. Besides self-compassion, you want to redefine success beyond output. And I think contentment or happiness or feeling like you have a well-rounded life is one measure of that. Promoting rest is productivity. That when you're basically recharging your battery, recharge the battery. It's okay. And workplace policies, which I'm struggling with. Doing something like 4 days a week. I've thought about that for a few years now, and it's really hard for me to go down to 4 days a week. Have mental health days, have more boundaries. I'm trying to schedule in more weeks off for vacation. These are all things that I've struggled with. I went years without ever taking a vacation. So it's all, I realized this was a severe problem of mine and one that I wasn't addressing. I've had many other things we could go into. And I always have a saying that when you work too hard, your body will take you down if you don't rest. If you don't rest, your body will take you down. Like you'll get sick, like I did. And I also got another stress-related illness later on, about 10 years later. Not as severe, but, it has made me constantly have to look at these things. And like any addict out there, I suppose, I fall right back into the old behavior patterns. So it's going to be hard work. And the self-compassion piece, I have to say, made so much sense for me because instead of demanding we change our behavior, you start with changing your view of yourself. And that's going to make the behavior change so much easier. It's like you're letting go of the demands and just allowing yourself to be. So, if nothing else, at least have self-compassion. Any other thoughts, Brian?
No, I mean, I like the self-compassion part of it because, like when I feel like I'm being mean or like shredding myself to pieces internally, I try to think like I'm talking to like my 6-year-old self, and I wouldn't treat my 6-year-old self like that or a 6-year-old kid,
That's lovely. Tony,
Yes.
you actually did something really tremendous. You sold your studio. You moved to a different city. Is this okay for me to say?
Of course.
I guess I'm saying it. But I saw this as you choosing you, and you moved a little bit out from Metro LA. So rather than commuting, you're just doing things in a different way and establishing a studio in a different place.
Correct.
So, but I saw this when I had to think about this. I wondered, I wonder how much this is Tony choosing to improve the quality of his life. Tell me.
No, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have never moved. I would have kept working 12, 14-hour days. And now that I'm going on 56, it's not old, but after doing this for 16 years of every single day, and even before I worked as a personal trainer, 10 to 12 clients a day. Hard, yeah. I worked in corporate before that, and got there early, stayed late. I just wanted to. We bought a house for the first time, together, and I thought, I just want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy the house. I want to not cut back on work. It's just because of the travel in LA, I can actually spend more time doing things I like to do versus just things I have to do. Not that because I love doing what I do. It's just I was doing more things I had to do versus love to do. So I did. It took me almost 56 years to come to that conclusion. But this is the first day that I'm like, I got up and I went to the gym. I drove 15 minutes to work. I had lunch. I got to work this. And I was like, oh my God, this is actually what I've been wanting to do. So. Yes,
that's incredible. So so in fact, yes, you improved your life just in making these choices for your life, and those were huge risks you took because to be able to make those choices. But I'm so glad you did because it sounds like you're much happier.
I mean, it's only 2 months into the house, but only one day of moving the studio. But I can already tell it's gonna take a lot of stress off of my body because when you get out of the car after a 2.5 hour drive, you're like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. So, and plus I get to still work with the people I enjoy working with. So
good. Well, I hope that means us too.
Of course.
So how wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And until then, I guess you and I can look to Brian for a model of behavior because he seems to not suffer from this epidemic,
right.
Which is worldwide.
Well, it's like part of life. You're supposed to enjoy your life a little bit, or else why are we even alive?
So Brian, Albert Ellis, who is one of the, people who came up with cognitive behavioral therapy. Albert Ellis would always say, he would say, the purpose of life is to have a fucking ball. He would say that over and over again. And that was to him the reason you lived. And you know what he loved to do? What gave him pure pleasure?
What?
Work. So, I mean, to each his own. To each his own. He did not feel stressed by it. That's going to that diathesis stress model. He did, he loved it. It fulfilled him. What he didn't like was doing things where he didn't produce and do things. Now, he may have suffered from this. I never really got a close window on him. But what he loved is to share the gospel of his work. So I think that was really what gave him pure pleasure. So
that's nice.
Yeah, and he never burned out. I mean, he was good. And burnout, though, what?
Because he had a ball.
He had a ball. He had a good time. I always found that fun. And he told me that over lunch once that he went on vacation. He went on vacation on a boat. He said, the worst 2 weeks of my life. He said, I always want to have a typewriter with me. That's what he always have, or I guess maybe a computer. But he said, I always want to have a typewriter so that I can do things. I can work. And that's what gave him pleasure. So, it's not that there's this absolute universal for everyone. We have to really look at who we are. And recovery starts with awareness, self-compassion, and cultural change. We have to stop looking down upon people who live well-rounded lives. That brings us to the end of the show today. Thanks for tuning in. If today sparked something in you, share it with someone who really needs it. And remember, growth doesn't happen lying down. So keep showing up, keep learning, and I'll see you next time. And don't forget to review, rate, follow Off the Couch with Dr. Greg on Apple and Spotify, wherever you listen. We have the links to the studies in the YouTube page, youtube.com/Dr. Greg, including today, there's a link to the Handout Reclaiming Rest Toolkit. And it is a link so you can take those 5 questions and look at what you can do. Hit us up on socials at Ask Dr. Greg. Until next time, this is Dr. Greg, Brian, and Tony bidding you farewell. Until next time, be present, be flexible, and be kind.